Yeah. This interpreter are ready. It's okay. Can can I continue? Yes. Okay.
We are ready. So let me continue addressing you in French. As I said earlier, you know all the countries that make up Eastern Africa. And I said that there is a clear problem with instability in Somalia. You know the various terrorist groups that operate in that country. You're all aware of the situation, internal conflicts in Sudan, as the current situation still develops and it not develop it further. The work being carried out by the African Union to try and mediate between the warring parties in Ethiopia, which led to the signature of the peace agreement among those countries. And as you no doubt aware, there was an agreement that was signed here in South Africa in Pretoria. And we worked as mediators and with our chairman, former President Obasanjo. I think this is something that we need to congratulate Africa about. We also went in as observers in South Sudan, and what we did in the various countries was to try and give an outlook of the situation of peace and security in Ethiopia. I've already touched upon that. So there has been positive developments in 2022 after several years of instability in Tigray region, and in November 2022 a peace agreement was signed between the two warring parties, that is Ethiopia and Tigray. And then Sudan, you're going to listen to a presentation on Sudan. I think somebody is going to address the issue of Sudan in much greater detail than I would. And it is only to try and tell you what, as African Union, we have done. So, because we are the organ that is supposed to oversee the efforts being made to try and contain these conflicts. So in November 2022, we also looked at the issue in Sudan, and the Peace and Security Council, so at the time, actually condemned the various activities that were going on there between the warring parties and called upon them to cease fighting. And I'm going to say that there was somebody who is going to speak about Sudan. He's better armed than I am to address the issue of Sudan, because I don't want to go there, because I know that I have limitations in terms of what I can say and what I can't. Now, and then we have the transitional AMISOM organ in Somalia. So we have gotten in touch with the United Nations so that they look at the request that had been submitted by the force of the AU in Somalia, where we want to see the arms embargo imposed on that country removed. And Somalia has been encouraged to carry out everything possible to try and complete phase 1 of the transitional plan. South Sudan, the Peace and Security Council also organized a mission in February 2023 so that we can see how best we could implement the revitalized agreement of 2018, so that we can then strengthen the transitional process that is ongoing in that country. Then I move to North Africa. I'm sure you know what North Africa is made of. So we have been looking at the security situation in Libya. A report which was submitted at the time took into account the migrants' situation in Tunisia. So what was the position of the African Union regarding this matter? The answer we received from the authorities in Tunisia is well known, and we were happy with the efforts made by the government of Libya to try and come up with a strategic plan so that the reconciliation can be further improved in Libya, so that every single political party would be encouraged to take part in the said discussion, so that the process becomes as inclusive as possible. Now, for Tunisia, I'm sure that you are aware of the situation there. In a press communique made in February 2023, the chairperson of the African Union Commission condemned the word used by the president of Tunisia on African migrant from sub-Saharan Africa. And the chairperson of the African Union said that we should not use such wording that encourages racism. Now, regarding West Africa, the situation in that region was characterized by the discussion designed to operationalize the transitional program in Guinea, in Equatorial Guinea, and also to make sure that there is progress in the Sahelian region. And the security situation was actually characterized by violent attacks by terrorist groups against the civilians and the military. There has been a deterioration of human rights because of the region being actually in a position where it faces a gradual increase in violent activities. And the other items that I decided to share with you relate to Burkina Faso, Guinea, Mali, and the Peace and Security Council continues to discuss with countries to see how best we can implement a roadmap so that we can seek durable peace in the countries concerned. And it is important that the African Union continue to support these countries so that we are able to better implement the roadmap so that there is proper transition to a return to constitutional democracy. The African Union is working also with ECOWAS to ensure that there is conducive mechanisms within the region, including in Senegal, so that we return to civilian governments in these countries, and also to ensure that there is transition and a better constitutional arrangement. Now, in Southern Africa, where we are currently, we've told you about the various countries because the situation is considered relatively as normal. However, some countries in these regions begin to experience situations that may threaten their political stability, terrorism, violent extremisms, climate change, and violations of human rights. We have been looking at these environmental problems, and I'm going to talk about it, especially what happened in Southern Africa, because there has been a noticeable increase in various events that are emanating from climate change, such as violent floods, and that, of course, does have an impact on the manner in which these countries use their mining resources to promote greater economic development. In South Africa, in Eswatini, in Malawi, in Mozambique, in Namibia, and Zambia. This situation increases the risk of insecurity and violent risks, social tensions, which may exacerbate the economic difficulties that these countries encounter. So all these situations keep increasing across the region. So overall, this is the situation that we've identified in Southern Africa, and what we've done as African Union in Mozambique, the chairperson of the Commission, going as far back as March 2021, made a press communique on the situation in Mozambique, which we deem to be extremely concerning. And we've also stated that through those communiques, the Commissioner to Peace and Security, Honorable Bankole, actually did travel to Mozambique, to Cabo Delgado, in 2021. And the Peace and Security Council, during its meeting in 2022, approved the deployment of SAMIM. It is the SADC mission to Mozambique. And the African Union was, by that action, desirous of supporting Mozambique, because if there is no greater opening of the region which would allow the African Union to bring to bear greater intervention. So the African Union could, of course, provide technical and financial support, and that's what we've been doing. And we support the actions made by the region so that we are indeed supporting these countries as a continental organ. The Peace and Security Council, regarding the situation in Mozambique, organized a ministerial meeting chaired by Namibia, where we agreed that we continue to support SMM in Mozambique, and we insisted on a very strong cooperation with the African Union so that we are able to alleviate the difficulties that the Cabo Delgado province has been experiencing. Now, in Eswatini, the African Union, through its Peace and Security Council, actually impressed upon the chairperson of the Commission so that he makes a press communique condemning the internal security situation in that region, and also another press communique was read by the chairperson of our institution regarding the assassination of Talani Maseko, who was a human rights advocate in Eswatini. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. President, I'm going to end my statement very shortly. So at the Department of Peace and Security, we know no limitation in trying to tackle the problems. I know that you wanted to listen to a detailed presentation on the peace and security situation across Africa, but I'm here as a delegate, as an envoy, and I have therefore the duty to ensure that this commitment is upheld. So we need to play by the rules. I know, Mr. Vice President, that you want to listen in detail the situation across the continent. I have a lot of documents. But what I'm going to do is also listen to you, take down notes, and the commissioner himself is going to come here. So therefore, in truth, you are going to have all the information regarding peace and security across the continent at hand, politically speaking, that is. And here I'm addressing you from the point of view of the technical experts of that institution. Honorable President, honorable MPs, ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, the situation of peace and security regarding the various trials and tribulations has been presented by myself, because in the past there were coups d'etats, violence, and so on. This has led to political marginalization and economic marginalization of some communities, and the lack of good governance and the incapacity of government to modernize their security and military institutions. This has been demonstrated by the ineffectiveness of the instruments that we have, and the lack of legal changes that are required for us to be able to address all these problems. And in order for us to maintain peace in the various countries, I think we need to name a few countries that are bedevilled by troubles. The Central African Republic, Mali, DRC, Somalia, and so on. These countries are subject of a very, very detailed discussion, because governments are seeking to preserve their territorial integrity at all costs. But sometimes we need to also take into account the importance of defending minorities. All these different approaches may lead to a misunderstanding in terms of the activities to be carried out to resolve these problems. Now, with regard to the crisis management, I think these are items that could lead to greater peace across the continent. So we have an early warning system that is encountering a few problems. The first of those challenges is the manipulation of information, which then forces countries to change tack and to concentrate themselves on analyzing the requisite document, the requisite data. This is due to a lack of will and capacity of the governments concerned. And therefore, they are not able to act on information received in order to be able to preempt any potential crisis. So early reaction to these early warnings need to be addressed so that countries outside the continent do not intervene in these conflicts, because it does lead to a lot of problems across the continent. Mediation is also one instrument that needs to be taken into account, because it is faced with a plethora of problems. We know that conflicts between countries keep growing. Countries do not ask the African Union to intervene, because the African Union is able to play a very significant role if called upon to do so. Therefore, in that case, conflicts that oppose governments to armed groups, efforts designed to propose greater mediation, I think are avenues that need to be explored, so that we are able to resolve problems that bedevil these countries. Because we have rebel groups that operate in these countries, and therefore we need to come up with policies that are strong enough for us to be able to work towards an agreement. So we could look at issues of Boko Haram, for example, and I could also refer to Somalia, to Sahel. So all these groupings do not want to actually reach an agreement, a peace agreement with the government in place. So the answer that we can then bring to bear, and which tells us to say that we have not been able to put to good use early warning systems in the various countries where these problems emerge. So we need to come up with peace mechanisms that are going to allow these countries to attain peace for the benefit of the local population and the governments themselves. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, members of Parliament of the Pan-African Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, despite all these challenges, despite all these problems, despite all these difficulties, this situation, though negative, is managed by the peace and security mechanisms at the African Union under the tutelage of Ambassador Bankole. And this is designed to strengthen the various initiatives in the pipeline so that the structure that we have can help us overcome the challenges that undermine peace, stability, and security across the continent. Thank you for your kind attention.
Monsieur Cecilio Jesus Mbamesi.
Mr. Cecilio Mbamesi, it's for us to thank you. And I think that honorable MPs have followed with keen interest the report on the 5 regions that make up our continent. The report relating to security matters. The Department of Peace and Security is extremely important in the continental architecture. And we've just listened to what is being done. And my sense is that you have been able to share your knowledge with the people who are equally knowledgeable, because as you no doubt are aware, these are continental representatives, and for everything that you've said, I think the honorable MPs here are quite able to get to grips with the pros and cons of what you've shared with us. So, and you've also shared with us the various issues relating to observer missions, where we're going to listen to another presentation, and then later on, the honorable MPs will chip in with their own comments. The list is quite long. I know that you have interrogations, questions, and you'll be able to answer the questions raised by the MPs. Mr. Cecilio Jesus, could you please move to the second presentation where we are going to share information on electoral observer missions.
President of Pan-African Parliament. This second topic it was under discussion in the African Union Commission. As you know, Peace and Security Department, Political Affairs, large. Like I was saying before, there is a challenge to try to come up some sensitive item like this one. Mr. Vice President, honorable members of Pan-African Parliament, I would like to say this. The Commissioner he didn't authorize me to address the issue. Like I said before, my presence here is to give you some information about peace and security situation in Africa at technical level. And this is when we are talking about electoral observation mission in Africa. This is more politics. The commissioner, you have to be aware of this. He didn't allow me to, Mr. Vice President, Honorable Member of Pan-African Parliament, I apologize sincerely. Even I come at night, he authorized me to come especially to address you about peace and security in Africa. Especially because the president of the Pan-African Parliament was emphasized that it's necessary someone come to address on the status on peace and security in Africa. I hope next time, I think that we are going to see my commissioner and I to be here again, Mr. Vice President, Honorable Member of Pan-African Parliament. That is going to be the good moment that we are going to get good information about this situation. Sincerely, I apologize. I cannot go beyond on this. Like I told you, you have a boss. I'm a delegate. You know what I mean, delegate. Delegate is something, you have some limitation. So, I hope, I'm taking note. If you have a question about the first item on peace and security, so I can answer. If there is no question, if there is some sensitive question that on peace and security matter, so on political level, I'm going to take note. And the second item, I think that you and I, Mr. Vice President, you and I, this is Africa. Like Vice President of Pan-African Parliament was saying, this is Africa. That means something. It's necessary to try to look many ways on this situation. You are going to see my commissioner here to address before you this observation mission on Africa, or observation mission, questions electoral in Africa. We have a template, we have a report, we have everything. I know I know the situation to speak about this.
Point of order.
But the limitation that I have, it cannot allow me
Point of order.
to discuss with you about the item.
Point of order.
I hope, Mr. Vice President,
It's wasting our time.
this is Parliament.
It's wasting our time, Chair.
My level is technical level. The technical level means something. My commissioner will be here. The report that I am going to produce, you are going to see my commissioner here.
Thank you. Très bien. Très bien, nous voulons.
Very well. We have listened to what you have said, and thank you very much. Mr. Cecilio Resus Mbamesi has presented to us a report. No one can do more than his best. We've just noticed that the sharing of information concerning the observer missions will not be taking place today. And the honorable members of Parliament, I would want us to focus on the presentation which has been made. On that note, we'll request our presenter to go back to his seat because we are going to the next phase, that is for speakers who will be taking the floor.
J'ai devant moi.
I have before me a list of members of Parliament who would like to take the floor. And I'll go directly to give the floor based on their order of request, and that will pose no problem. So we'll give 2 minutes to each speaker so that we'll be able to exhaust the entire list and close for the day. Honorable Victoria Kinson from Malawi, you have the floor.
Est-ce qu'elle est dans la salle?
Is she in the room?
Apparemment, non.
Apparently, no. She's not in the room. Honorable Suleiman Sao from Gambia.
Il est là?
Is he there? He's not there either.
Il dit.
Il retire.
Ah, il retire sa question.
Oh, he has withdrawn his question because his question was based on the electoral mission, so we understand it's normal. Honorable Adeberto Costa Jr. from Angola, is he in the hall? You have the floor, Honorable.
Não tem a ver com.
I'm sorry, it's not related to the subject matter. My question was related to the presentations that were made in the morning session. Thank you.
Le président du Parlement.
The president of the Pan-African Parliament is already in the hall. You understand why I was there? Because he was unavoidably absent. So since the owner of the seat is there, I'll humbly invite him to come and take his seat. Mr. President, kindly come and take your seat.
May I thank the Vice President, Honorable Ango, for rescuing me when I was absent. We had a very, very difficult meeting with the AU on the PAP budget. Very difficult one. We've just come out of that meeting. Anyway, can we proceed, DSP? Is there a list? Is there a list? Where is the list? It's long. Anyone? Thank you. And order. I've just been given the list of members wanting to debate. But there is another issue related, which is under peace and security. We have Sudan, and the ambassador is sitting in the chamber. It's better Sudan presents so that when we debate everything, because it's all about peace and security on the continent. Thank you. So, there are two presenters. There is a team of Sudanese who live in South Africa. So they call themselves the Sudanese community in South Africa. They also want to express themselves on the conflict. And then after that, we give the ambassador. Then we debate. So, Mr. Khalid, representing the citizens or Sudanese community in South Africa, can you come forward and do your presentation? We believe the presentations will not take more than, especially yours. Since you have your ambassador, you can't go beyond 10 minutes. Because you'll be saying the same things, I believe. Mr. Harid, the one you saw in front here, he used to be a member of staff of PAP, but member of staff from Sudan. He was the head of communications at the Pan-African Parliament. And then he left, he got an opportunity to go somewhere in Iraq there where the UN stole him from PAP. And then he worked there, and then now he's back to South Africa. Mr. Harid, you have the floor. Harid.
Thank you very much indeed, Honorable President of the Pan-African Parliament, Honorable Vice Presidents of the Pan-African Parliament, Honorable Members, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. First of all, let me thank the PAP for giving us this opportunity to address this esteemed House and allowing the voice of the people of Africa, particularly the voice of the people of Sudan, to be heard. By way of introduction, let me briefly say something about the two civil society organizations that I represent. The first one is the Sudanese community in Gauteng, of which I am the current president. And this organization strives to provide social and cultural support to its members and work to reflect our cultural heritage and build ties with the host community here in South Africa. On the other hand, the Sudan Solidarity Group of South Africa was formed in 2016 to promote democracy, human rights, and the rule of law to further political, economic, and social development. Both organizations are registered here with the authorities in South Africa. We decided to come together and make this presentation to shed light on what is going on in Sudan from a human rights and a humanitarian perspective. So I will go straight to the presentation. Okay. Let me just sort out the technical problems here. And technical people, I'm having some difficulty. Can somebody help, please? I'm trying to get the screen in the right position, but for some reason it is not allowing me to. And it doesn't want to move from one slide to the other. Technical people, please help.
I think they are coming. One is coming.
Yes, it was set up and everything, but suddenly things went wrong.
Go to the other one.
Which one? It's not this one.
Go to the other one. This one doesn't want to work.
But I have to,
Yeah, go to this one. It's the same problem.
what's the problem with that? Let me close it totally.
Yeah, floor granted.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. As requesting, if his computer is failing, can't we have another presenter as they're still maybe as he's preparing himself with suggestion,
It's fine now.
Mr. President? Thank you.
Okay.
Brilliant suggestion. But the protocol is that the ambassador cannot present after him. So he has to come first. It's either his computer fails and the presentation fails. And then it appears you're okay now. Can we proceed?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Apologies for this connection problem, actually. So we have a PowerPoint presentation. I will go very quickly with the initial thing, the background. Sudan, the population is 45 million. The area is 1.886 million. We have our neighbors are the Central African Republic, Chad, Libya, Egypt, Eritrea, Ethiopia, South Sudan, and across the Red Sea, we have Saudi Arabia. The capital is Khartoum with a population of about 5 million. Sudan gained independence on the 1st of January, 1956. This is generally a map of Sudan for you to look at. Actually, this is a map of both Sudan and South Sudan. To go also very quickly, we gained independence, like I said, in 1956, but we had the first democratic government between 1956 and 1958. Then we had the first military coup in 1958 that was of General Aboud. That regime was overthrown by popular uprising in October 1964. Then we had the second democracy, 64 to 69. Then the second military coup of Nimeri on actually the anniversary of that coup is today, 25 May 1969. Again, this was overthrown by popular uprising in 1985. Then we had the third democracy up to 1989. And then the third military coup of General al-Bashir on that date. This was overthrown again by popular uprising in April 2019. Then we had the transitional government of Dr. Hamdok, which was overthrown by a military coup on the 21st of October 2021. Current leader is General al-Burhan. So as you can see, we have been in a very vicious circle or a spiral of military coup, civilian government, military coup, civilian government. All military governments have been overthrown by popular uprising. First civil war started in Sudan in August 1955 in the south. Then the first peace agreement was signed in 1972 that gave the south regional autonomy. Second civil war started in 1983 in the south. Comprehensive peace agreement was signed in 2005, and South Sudan gained independence in July 2011. Darfur conflict, that's another conflict, started in 2003. A series of peace deals were signed with various factions that didn't hold. And then the Juba peace agreement was signed after the overthrow of al-Bashir's regime. One faction in Darfur did not sign the agreement. That is the Sudan Liberation Movement of Abdul Wahid Noor. Also, the SPLM North in the Nuba Mountains of Abdul Aziz al-Hilu did not sign the Juba peace agreement. the Rapid Support Force. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the Rapid Support Force because it's one of the two parties to the current conflict. This is a paramilitary force created during al-Bashir's regime from a largely tribal militia, formerly known by the local people as the Janjaweed, to fight alongside the government forces against the Darfur rebels. As a matter of fact, we can go a little bit before that, and the history of this tribal militia. They were organized under the name of the Border Guard, and then it became the Rapid Support Force. This group was affiliated to the National Armed Forces and were given military ranks. They were largely responsible for widespread atrocities during that time in Darfur. One of their leaders, in fact, Ali Kosheb, was indicted by the International Criminal Court, and he is now in The Hague undergoing trial. The original leader of the RSF was a tribal leader named Musa Hilal, who was unseated by the current leader, Muhammad Hamdan Dagalo, better known as Himeti, who was given the rank of Lieutenant General. After the Darfur conflict eased, the RSF were used by al-Bashir's regime to do their dirty work elsewhere. They became like a mercenary force and were involved in the Libyan conflict alongside General Haftar. They were also employed and paid by the European Union to take on the responsibility of fending off illegal migration to Europe. So they were used by the EU to do that. They also went to Yemen to fight alongside Saudi Arabia and the Saudi-backed government. They turned against al-Bashir and were instrumental in his overthrow. They were heavily implicated in the massacre that took place in June 2019 in front of the armed forces headquarters, in which hundreds of young men and women were killed, wounded, and raped. At the time of the overthrow of al-Bashir, the RSF was estimated to be 10,000 strong. Currently, they are estimated to be more than 40,000, and in other estimates, maybe even up to 100,000. They are better paid than the Sudanese army or the Sudanese armed forces, and probably better equipped in terms of light and medium weaponry. But they lack the heavy weaponry and air power. Now I will go to the conflict and how it started. Tension started brewing between the National Armed Forces and the RSF at a military air base in Marawi in the north of the country. Then the actual clashes actually started on the morning of 15th of April in a southern suburb of Khartoum at an RSF barracks. Fighting quickly spread to the rest of the capital and to some other cities and towns around the country, notably in Niala, in El Geneina, Al Fashir, those are in Darfur, and Al Ubayd, which is in the Kordofan region, and to a lesser extent in other places. Now, the humanitarian toll. As of the 16th of May, the United Nations, the Federal Ministry of Health estimated that at least 705 people have been killed and that over 2,000 people were injured. Now, this is as of 16th of May. Since then, these figures have probably increased quite considerably. Also, according to UN OCHA, as of 17th of May, over 936,000 people have been displaced by this conflict. 736,000 or more than 736,000 were displaced internally, people moving mainly from the capital, Khartoum, to other cities or to the villages in the countryside. 200,000 of those, of the 936, have crossed into neighboring countries, notably into Egypt, into Chad, into Ethiopia, and into South Sudan. Now, this is a map that shows the movement of the displacement and the numbers. also supplied or provided by UN OCHA. Now the destruction. This conflict has caused the destruction of most of the basic infrastructure in Khartoum. Hospitals, schools, roads, the Khartoum International Airport, power stations, water treatment plant, you name it. And private and public properties have been destroyed in this conflict. Sudan National Army has been using heavy artillery, tanks, and airstrikes against the RSF. But while doing that, unfortunately, they're destroying the infrastructure, and many people are getting either killed or injured, or at least displaced from their houses and from their places of work. To make things worse, criminals have entered into this scene. Widespread looting has been taking place in the capital, in Khartoum, and to a lesser extent in other areas, but mainly in Khartoum. The commercial district is no more. It's completely destroyed and looted. I've got some pictures to show you of some of the destruction that has taken place. You can see one of them is in Khartoum Airport, where on the first day, a Saudi Airlines aircraft was hit, and then other aircraft were also hit, rendering Khartoum Airport actually unusable for now. You can see the smoke coming out of the main city there. You can see this is a commercial area that was destroyed. Maybe just I want to go back to the picture before that. This is one of the biggest malls in the city, Afra Mall. The picture on the left is before, the picture on the right is after. You can see how the destruction has been. These are also buildings. The one on the left, top and bottom, is actually a building within the headquarters of the Sudan National Armed Forces. The picture on the top is after it was gutted, and the picture at the bottom is what it was. And then you can see on the right, this is a picture of a commercial building. This is now Khartoum Airport. This is the departure lounge. On the left is before, on the right is after. The airport is completely destroyed. Now, the current developments, what is happening? USA and Saudi Arabia are brokering between the two factions, and they have brokered the temporary ceasefire for 1 week, starting at 21:45 Central African time on Monday, the 22nd of May. That was just 2.5 days ago. Unfortunately, there are still skirmishes between the two sides. So even though the ceasefire is largely holding, but there are infringements from both sides. Only yesterday, an aircraft belonging to the Sudanese National Air Force was downed by the RSF in Omdurman. And we have conflicting stories as to whether the pilots have been killed or they are alive or they have been captured by the RSF or whether they are safe within the armed forces, within the military hospital, as some stories have come. We do not know exactly for sure what has been happening. The ceasefire is essentially to allow for humanitarian aid to get through and to allow for the burial of dead bodies that have been rotting in the streets of Khartoum. Thousands of bodies, hundreds of bodies are all over the place. People are unable to come out and bury them because the conflict was continuing between the two sides. And there was fear that, people might get hit by stray bullets. And this is actually what has been happening. Civilians have been caught in the middle, and they've been hit by stray bullets. And most of the civilians who died died as a result of that. People had to flee their homes. My own sister had to flee to Egypt because the house next door was hit and there were snipers on rooftops. So this is a story that is being repeated over and over again in the country. What do we want the PAP to do? We would like the PAP to work together with the African Union, with IGAD, with the US, the European Union, the Arab League, and others, to, first of all, bring about pressure on the warring parties to sign a permanent ceasefire. That's the number one. We want the PAP to also put pressure with those partners to bring about on the warring parties to come to the negotiating table and resolve their differences by peaceful means, not through the barrel of the gun. War does not resolve problems. We in Africa, we know this very well. People to the negotiating table and to resolve their differences by peaceful means. We want the PAP also to bring about pressure on the warring parties so that the country can return to the political path that was agreed upon before the conflict erupted, and return the country to civilian rule, civilian democratic rule. We had gone a long way before this conflict had started towards achieving some kind of a roadmap or a plan to return to civilian rule. This war has now completely stopped that process. We want the war to stop. We want the parties to come to the negotiating table. We want the country to return to that process, that political process, to return the country to civilian democratic rule. All we want is for the war to stop. All we want is for the humanitarian aid to reach the people who are stranded either in their homes or who have been displaced either internally or externally. We want that to stop. We want the war to stop. War is never the answer. Peace is the answer. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Switch off your hello, Mr. Khalid. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Khalid. There are about 30 MPs who have registered to speak on peace and security in Sudan, and we're likely to have more. Now, let's move like this. We now have, the next presenter is the ambassador of Sudan. We, after a few consultations, we think this is a topic of interest for all of us. Sudan. We want to go back to our countries understanding the nitty-gritties of this conflict. And Mr. Khalid, thank you very much. That was very informative. And I think we should clap for him again. Next is the ambassador, but please, I beg your indulgence. Tomorrow we have a lot of time. Would rather rise now, meaning we close debate now. Tomorrow, first presenter will be the ambassador. And at his advantage, he is heard from the senior citizen from his country. He is also likely to adjust a bit or add a bit. Then after the ambassador's presentation, we then allow these 30, maybe 40, I don't know, tomorrow. But we would want to give everybody a chance on the issue of Sudan. So the way you clapped, you have agreed that for today, let's close here. We have consulted with the ambassador. The ambassador is agreeable to be back here at 9 a.m. tomorrow to do a thorough presentation. I request all of you, honorable members, please, for tomorrow, Friday, Let's all be in the chamber by 9 and listen to the ambassador. Mr. Clark, any announcements?
It's okay for 2 minutes.
Okay. So we can now close business for today. We meet tomorrow. We adjourn to tomorrow, 9 a.m. I thank you.
Yeah, he's asking to be given opportunity to give the message
On Sudan or anything else?